Daewon stood near the large window at Gateway Station 7, watching the ships move slowly through space. He had been waiting for almost an hour now, but he didn't mind. After 6 months working on the station's environmental systems, he was finally going home to New Jeju. The thought made him smile a little. He carried only a small bag with his belongings and a worn technical manual that he had read at least 20 times. Daewon was not the kind of person who needed much. He kept to himself mostly, did his work well, and tried not to bother anyone. That was how he liked things. The boarding area was full of different species. There were humans like him, of course, but there were also Vaxil traders with their blue-scaled skin, talking loudly about profit margins. A group of Murin diplomats stood in the corner, their tall bodies covered in formal robes. Some species Daewon didn't even recognize moved through the crowd. This was normal for a major station like Gateway 7. Everyone came through here eventually. The announcement came over the speakers. The transport ship Horizon's Gate would begin boarding soon. People started gathering their things and moving toward the designated area. Daewon picked up his bag and joined the slow movement of bodies toward the gate. That was when she entered. The crowd noticed her immediately. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People turned to look, then quickly looked away. Daewon saw why. She was Velkari. He had never seen one in person before. The Velkari were rare in common space. They kept to themselves mostly, staying in their own systems far from the major trade routes. Daewon knew the stories, of course. Everyone did. The Velkari had been isolated for centuries after some kind of incident during first contact. People said they could read minds. People said they were dangerous. People said a lot of things. She was smaller than Daewon had expected, maybe as tall as his shoulder. Her skin was silver and seemed to glow faintly under the station lights. Patterns moved across her skin like waves on water, creating soft light that shifted from blue to white to pale green. She had 4 fingers on each hand instead of 5. Her eyes were large and completely black, like pools of dark water. She carried a single travel case and wore simple clothes that looked designed for function rather than style. She moved carefully through the crowd, her head held up with dignity, but Daewon could see the tension in her shoulders. The crowd parted around her like water around a stone. No one wanted to get too close. Parents pulled their children back. Traders turned away to check their cargo lists. Even the Murin diplomats, usually so proper and formal, shifted to maintain distance. The Velkari woman walked to an empty seat and sat down. The seats on either side of her remained empty, even though the boarding area was crowded. People stood rather than sit near her. She placed her case at her feet and folded her hands in her lap. She stared straight ahead, her face showing no emotion. But those patterns on her skin moved faster now. Daewon watched all of this from his position near the back. He saw how she sat very still, like she was trying to make herself smaller. He saw how no one would look directly at her. He saw the empty space around her grow larger as more people deliberately chose to stand or sit far away. Something about it bothered him. Boarding began. The line moved slowly as people showed their tickets and entered the ship. Daewon waited his turn, but he kept glancing back at the Velkari woman. She stood up to join the line, and immediately a gap opened around her. People in front of her moved faster. People behind her hung back. Inside the ship, things were worse. The Horizon's Gate was a standard transport vessel. Not fancy, but comfortable enough for the 3-day journey to New Jeju. The main passenger cabin had rows of seats, about 6 across. Most passengers would spend their time here during the flight, with small sleeping compartments available for rent at extra cost. Daewon found his assigned seat near the middle of the cabin. He put his bag in the overhead storage and settled in with his manual. Around him, other passengers did the same. The cabin filled with the usual sounds of people getting comfortable, storing luggage, and greeting seat neighbors. Then the Velkari woman entered the cabin. The change was immediate. People who had been talking went quiet. Those still standing in the aisles hurried to their seats. The woman checked her ticket and walked to her row, 3 rows ahead of Daewon. He could see her clearly from his position. She reached her assigned seat, which was on the aisle. She sat down carefully and placed her case under the seat in front of her. Then she clasped her hands together and looked straight ahead, at the back of the seat in front of her. The seat next to her by the window remained empty, and the middle seat. Both stayed empty even as the cabin filled up around her. Daewon watched as passengers came down the aisle, checked their tickets, and then looked at the row where the Velkari woman sat. He saw them pause. He saw them check their tickets again, even though they clearly showed the seat numbers. Then he saw them speak quietly to the flight attendant, a tired-looking human woman who had probably seen this before. Some passengers asked to switch seats. Others claimed there must be a mistake with their assignment. A few didn't even bother with excuses, they just moved to different seats even if those seats weren't theirs. The flight attendant tried to maintain order, but she looked overwhelmed. Through it all, the Velkari woman sat perfectly still. But Daewon could see that glow on her skin pulsing faster now. The patterns moved more quickly, shifting colors in ways that seemed random but probably weren't. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew what loneliness looked like. He had seen that look before. He had felt it before, actually. Growing up on an early colony world had not been easy. His family had been poor, different from the other settlers. He remembered being the kid no one wanted to sit with at school. He remembered eating lunch alone. He remembered that special kind of hurt that comes from being deliberately excluded. The cabin was almost full now. The flight attendant had given up trying to enforce seat assignments. People sat where they wanted, and somehow that meant anywhere except near the Velkari woman. 3 empty seats in a cabin where every other spot was taken. Daewon closed his manual. He looked at the empty seats around the woman. He looked at his own seat, comfortable and anonymous in the middle of the crowd. He thought about his technical manual and the 3-day journey ahead and how easy it would be to just sit here and do nothing. Then he thought about that kid eating lunch alone. He unbuckled his safety belt and stood up. A few passengers near him glanced over, curious. Daewon reached up and pulled his bag from the overhead storage. He stepped into the aisle. The cabin had been loud with conversation and the sounds of people settling in. But as Daewon walked forward toward the row with the empty seats, the noise level dropped. People noticed. How could they not? He walked past rows of faces turning to watch him. He walked past the flight attendant, who looked confused. He walked past all the unspoken rules and expectations and fear. He reached the row where the Velkari woman sat. He stopped beside the empty seat next to her. The cabin was completely silent now. Daewon lifted his bag into the overhead storage above that row. Then, without saying a word, without asking permission, without any acknowledgement of the dozens of eyes watching him, he sat down in the middle seat directly next to the Velkari woman. He could feel everyone staring. He could hear the whispers starting. He didn't look at any of them. Instead, he buckled his safety belt, pulled out his technical manual, and opened it to the page he had marked. Beside him, the Velkari woman went completely still. Even the patterns on her skin stopped moving for a moment. Then slowly they began to pulse again, but different now, softer somehow. The colors shifted to something that looked almost like surprise. She turned her head slightly to look at him, those dark eyes reflecting the cabin lights. Daewon didn't look up from his manual. He just sat there, reading about environmental system maintenance protocols, as if sitting next to a Velkari woman was the most normal thing in the world, as if an empty seat was just an empty seat, as if she was just another passenger. The whispers grew louder around them, but Daewon turned the page and kept reading. Beside him, after a long moment, the Velkari woman settled back in her seat. She looked forward again, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. The ship's engines began to hum as they prepared for departure. The flight attendant started her safety announcement. Life aboard the Horizon's gate moved on, but something had shifted. Something small but important. One person had moved over without a word, and sometimes that's all it takes to begin changing everything. The first hour passed in silence. Daewon read his manual, turning pages at his normal pace. The Velkari woman sat beside him, looking out the window at the stars streaking past as the ship moved through space. Neither of them spoke, but the silence between them felt different from the hostile quiet of the boarding area. This silence was comfortable, almost peaceful. Around them, the cabin had returned to normal activity. People talked to their neighbors, read books or watched screens, slept or played games. But Daewon noticed that many kept glancing toward their row. Some looked curious. Others looked disapproving. A few looked confused, like they couldn't understand why anyone would choose to sit there. Daewon ignored them all. He had made his choice. He wasn't going to apologize for it or explain it. He just kept reading. After about 2 hours, the flight attendant came through with refreshment service. She pushed a cart down the aisle, offering drinks and small snacks to the passengers. When she reached their row, she smiled at Daewon and asked what he wanted. "Just water, please," he said. She handed him a sealed bottle and a small package of crackers. Then she turned to the Velkari woman. Her smile became tighter, more professional, and less genuine. "And you, miss?" "Water also, please," the Velkari woman said. Her voice surprised Daewon. It was musical, with harmonics that seemed to echo strangely, like she was speaking with more than one voice at the same time, though they blended together smoothly. It wasn't unpleasant, just different. The flight attendant nodded and reached for another bottle. Then she paused. She looked at her cart, moving items around. She frowned. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding very sorry at all. "It looks like I'm out of the snack packages. I'll bring you one when I come back through." She moved on to the next row before the Velkari woman could respond. Daewon watched the cart move away. He had clearly seen at least a dozen snack packages still on the lower shelf. The flight attendant had lied. And not even a good lie, just a casual, thoughtless cruelty born from prejudice. The Velkari woman said nothing. She just held her water bottle and stared at it. Daewon looked at the unopened package in his own lap. He hadn't been particularly hungry anyway. Without saying anything, he leaned over slightly and placed the package on the armrest between them. The woman looked at it, then at him. Those black eyes studied his face for a long moment. "You don't have to," she said quietly. "I know," Daewon replied, "but I don't really want them." It was a small lie, kinder than the flight attendant's big one. The woman seemed to understand that. After a moment, she picked up the package. "Thank you," she said. Daewon nodded and went back to his manual. But he noticed that the patterns on her skin had changed again. They moved more slowly now in colors that seemed warmer somehow. Another hour passed. Daewon was starting to feel drowsy from the gentle hum of the ship's engines when the woman spoke again. "Why did you sit here?" He looked up from his manual. She was watching him directly now, her head tilted slightly to one side. The question was fair. Daewon thought about how to answer it. He could give a simple answer, something easy and meaningless. Or he could tell the truth. "The seat was empty," he said finally. "You looked like you could use one less thing to worry about." She studied him for another long moment. Those eyes were hard to read. No pupils, no whites, just that deep black. But Daewon had the feeling she was trying to decide something about him. "Most people avoid us," she said. "The Velkari, I mean. They think we can read minds. Can you?" "No." A sound like a soft laugh came from her throat. "We read body language very well. Micro-expressions. Small details that most species don't notice about each other. But not thoughts. Never thoughts." "That must be useful," Daewon said. "It makes people uncomfortable. When you can see what they feel before they know they're feeling it. They think you have invaded their privacy. So they fear us. They avoid us. They tell stories about us that aren't true." She spoke calmly, like she was describing something that happened to someone else. But Daewon could see the tension in her shoulders again, hear something sad beneath the harmonics of her voice. "Where are you traveling to?" he asked, changing the subject gently. "New Jeju," she said. "I have a research position there. I'm a xenobotanist. I study how different plant species interact across ecosystems." "Really?" Daewon felt a small spark of interest. "I'm an environmental systems engineer. I work with life support and atmospheric processors. I've been away on a contract, but New Jeju is home." For the first time, something like a smile seemed to cross her face. It was subtle. Velkari faces didn't move quite like human faces, but Daewon thought he saw it. "Perhaps we will see each other there," she said. "Maybe so." They fell back into silence, but it was different now. Not just comfortable, but almost friendly. Daewon returned to his manual, and the woman looked out the window again. But something had shifted between them. Some barrier had been crossed. The ship's day cycle dimmed toward evening. The cabin lights lowered. Many passengers pulled out blankets or reclined their seats to sleep. Daewon felt his eyes getting heavy. He woke sometime later. He wasn't sure how long he had slept, to find the cabin dark, except for small reading lights here and there. He blinked and stretched as much as the seat would allow. A soft glow caught his attention. The Velkari woman's skin was glowing brighter now in the darkness. those patterns moving in slow waves across her arms and neck. It was beautiful, actually, like watching waves on a moonlit ocean. She noticed him looking, and the glow dimmed slightly. "Sorry," she said quietly. "It's harder to control when I'm tired. I don't mean to disturb you." "You're not disturbing me," Day One said honestly. "It's actually kind of nice. Like a nightlight." She made that sound like a laugh again. "My name is Therai, Day One." They shook hands, which seemed to amuse Therai. Her four-fingered hand was cooler than his, the skin smooth and slightly damp like a river stone. "Human custom," she said. "I studied before coming here. Shaking hands means peace between meeting parties." More or less, Day One agreed. "Though sometimes it's just what you do. Many customs are like that. We do them because everyone expects us to do them, not because they have real meaning anymore." Day One smiled. "That's probably true." The ship was quiet around them. Most people slept. Therai looked at the darkness of the cabin for a moment, then spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you know what people say about my kind? About Velkari?" Day One considered lying, then decided she deserved honesty. "Some things. That you can read minds. That your people did something during first contact that got you isolated. That you're dangerous." He paused. "I don't know what's true and what isn't." "The first contact incident was a misunderstanding," Therai said quietly. "A human diplomat was negotiating with our leaders. He was lying about his government's intentions. We could see it in his body language, his expressions. We told him we knew he was lying. He panicked and accused us of telepathy, of invasion of privacy, of being dangerous. His government believed him. They put our systems under quarantine. That seems unfair." It was. But fear is powerful. Easier to keep us isolated than to admit the mistake. For centuries, we stayed in our own space. Only recently have we been allowed to travel freely again. And still, everywhere we go, the fear follows. Day One heard the pain in her voice, hidden under the calm words and musical harmonics. He thought about his own childhood again, about being different and alone. "I grew up on a colony world," he said. "Not New Jeju, but another one. It was tough at first. Systems kept failing. Life support would go down. Water recyclers broke constantly. My parents were engineers. They worked day and night keeping everything running. We didn't have time for social things. Other families thought we were strange. Thought we kept to ourselves because we were too good for them. Were you? No, we were just tired. And poor. And different. But kids at school didn't understand that. So I ate lunch alone most days. Sat by myself." He smiled without humor. "I remember what that feels like. Being in a room full of people and still being completely alone." Therai was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very softly, "Thank you." "For what?" "For sitting here. For treating me like a person instead of a fear." "You are a person," Day One said simply. Across the aisle, someone stirred in their sleep. A few rows ahead, a child cried softly before being comforted by their parent. The ship hummed its way through the dark between stars. "I was scared to take this position," Therai admitted. "On New Jeju, I knew it would be like this. The stairs, the isolation, the loneliness. I almost turned it down." "What changed your mind?" "My mother. She told me that change only happens when someone is brave enough to step into the uncomfortable spaces. If all Velkari stay hidden in our own systems, nothing will ever be different. So here I am, being brave." She laughed quietly, or trying to be. "I think you're doing fine," Day One said. They sat together in the soft darkness, two people from different worlds who had somehow found themselves in the same uncomfortable space. And in that moment, neither of them felt quite so alone. "Tell me about New Jeju," Therai said. "What is it like?" So Day One told her. He talked about the purple mountains and the thin atmosphere, about the bioluminescent plants that glowed at night, Maki. The second day aboard the Horizon's Gate began with artificial sunlight slowly brightening in the cabin. Day One woke to the smell of breakfast being served somewhere nearby. His neck was stiff from sleeping in the seat, but he felt rested enough. Therai was already awake beside him, looking at something on a small datapad. The patterns on her skin moved in steady, calm waves. She looked more relaxed than she had yesterday. "Good morning," Day One said, his voice rough from sleep. "Good morning." She glanced at him. "You snore a little." "Sorry about that." "It's fine." It was actually comforting, like having company. They went to the dining area for breakfast. It was a small space with tables and a serving counter. About 20 passengers could fit at a time. When they entered together, Daewon noticed several people look up, then quickly look away. A few whispered to each other. They got their food and found a table near the window. Daewon had oatmeal and coffee. Thirai had some kind of grain mixture and fruit that Daewon didn't recognize. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars slowly drift past outside. "Can I ask about the patterns?" Daewon said finally. "On your skin. What do they mean?" Thirai looked down at her arms, where blue and green waves moved slowly. "They show emotion mostly. We Velkari evolved on a world with very little light. We lived deep underground for thousands of years. Sound didn't travel well in our cave systems, but light did. So we learned to communicate with light as much as with words. What are you feeling now?" "Calm. Content. Maybe a little bit happy." She tilted her head. "Yours are steady. That means I'm not lying." "I wasn't checking," Daewon said. "I know. But most people do, even if they don't realize it. They watch my patterns and try to catch me in a lie or a hidden emotion. It makes conversations exhausting." "I can imagine." A woman approached their table. She was human, maybe in her 40s, with short dark hair and careful eyes. Daewon recognized her from the cabin. She sat across the aisle from them. "Excuse me," she said, looking nervous. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Thirai's pattern shifted, moving faster. Preparing for rejection or confrontation, Daewon guessed, but the woman just said, "I wanted to ask about your research. I heard you mention xenobotany yesterday. I'm a teacher, and I think my students would find your work fascinating. Would you mind if I asked a few questions?" Thirai looked surprised. The patterns on her skin flickered through several colors quickly before settling into something that looked like cautious hope. "I don't mind," she said quietly. The woman smiled and pulled out a chair. "My name is Heejin. I teach biology at the school on New Jeju. Thirai, this is Daewon. Nice to meet you both." Heejin sat down and leaned forward with genuine interest. "So, xenobotany, how did you get into that field?" Thirai explained about growing up surrounded by the underground gardens of her homeworld, where Velkari grew food in complete darkness using bioluminescent plants. She talked about studying how different plant species could be engineered to support each other in hostile environments. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, more confident. The harmonics in it almost sounded like she was singing. Daewon ate his breakfast and listened. He saw how Thirai's whole body language changed when talking about her work. The tension left her shoulders. Her hands moved expressively. She was a person who loved what she did, and it showed. Heejin asked smart questions and took notes on her datapad. Other passengers glanced over occasionally, and Daewon saw their expressions shift from suspicion to curiosity. Someone talking passionately about plant biology wasn't very threatening, apparently. When they finished breakfast and stood to leave, Heejin smiled at Thirai warmly. "Thank you for your time. When you get settled on New Jeju, please consider visiting my classroom. I think the students would love to meet a real xenobotanist." Thirai's patterns glowed bright with pleasure. "I would like that very much." As they walked back toward the main cabin, Daewon noticed that people didn't move away from Thirai quite as obviously as before. A few even nodded politely. It was a small change, but it was something. They spent the afternoon in the observation deck, a small area with large windows looking out into space. Only a few other passengers were there, scattered around the room, quietly reading or sleeping. "Tell me about your parents," Thirai said. "The engineers." So Daewon told her. He talked about his father, who could fix any machine with limited tools and unlimited patience. About his mother, who understood systems like other people understood music, seeing how all the pieces fit together. About growing up watching them work together, learning that the most important thing wasn't being the smartest or the fastest, but being reliable when others were depending on you. "They sound like good people," Thirai said. They were. They died 5 years ago. Equipment failure in the atmospheric processor. They were trying to fix it manually when it exploded. He paused. They saved the whole colony that day, 3,000 people. But they didn't save themselves. I'm sorry. Me too. Daewon looked out at the stars, but I try to honor them by doing the work they taught me, keeping systems running, keeping people safe. They were quiet for a while. Then Thirai said, My father was a gardener. He tended the deep forests beneath our cities. He died when I was young. A cave collapse. 20 workers were trapped. He stayed behind to help them escape. Only 3 didn't make it out. He was one of them. Sounds like our parents would have understood each other, Daewon said. Yes. I think they would have. A little. Later, a young boy came running into the observation deck, followed by his tired-looking mother. The boy was maybe 6 or 7 years old. He stopped suddenly when he saw Thirai, his eyes going wide. Mom, look, she's glowing. The mother, whose name tag read Bora, grabbed her son's hand. Quan, don't be rude. Come away. But Quan pulled free and walked closer, staring at Thirai with open fascination. Why do you glow? Are you magic? Quan. Bora's voice was sharp with embarrassment and something like fear. Thirai looked at the little boy. Her pattern shifted to soft blue and white, moving in gentle waves. I'm not magic. My people evolved to make light. It helps us communicate. That's so cool. Can you make different colors? Yes. See? Thirai's patterns changed to pink, then yellow, then back to blue. Quan laughed with delight. Do it again. That's enough, Bora said, reaching for her son. She looked at Thirai with poorly hidden distrust. Come on, Quan, leave the lady alone. But Mom, now. Bora pulled Quan away. As they left, the boy kept looking back over his shoulder, waving at Thirai. She waved back, her patterns dimming slightly. She was afraid. Thirai said quietly after they were gone. The mother, afraid I would hurt her child. She was, Daewon agreed. But the kid wasn't. Maybe that's what matters. Maybe. That evening, they ate dinner in the dining area again. More passengers were there this time, and Daewon noticed that Hyojin had saved seats for them at her table. They sat down, and Hyojin introduced them to the couple sitting with her. The meal was pleasant. People asked Thirai questions about her homeworld, about Velkari culture, about her work. She answered carefully at first, then with growing ease as she realized the questions came from genuine curiosity rather than hostility. After dinner, as they walked through the ship's corridors back to the cabin, they passed a Vaxil trader that Daewon recognized from the boarding area. The trader, whose skin was deep blue and covered in scales, stopped them. You, he said, pointing at Daewon. You're the human who sat with her? I am, Daewon said carefully. The Vaxil, Gretek, leaned closer. He smelled like metal and something spicy. You should be careful. The Velkari are not to be trusted. There are reasons they were kept separate from the rest of us for so long. What reasons? Daewon asked. They see too much. They know too much. They look at you and see your secrets. Gretek's eyes moved to Thirai. Your kind should have stayed in your caves. Thirai's patterns went dark and still. Daewon felt anger rise in his chest. We're done here, he said firmly. He took Thirai's arm gently and led her past the trader. Behind them, Gretek called out, Don't say I didn't warn you, human. They didn't stop walking until they reached the cabin. Thirai sat down heavily in her seat. Her patterns were barely visible now, just faint shadows moving under her skin. I'm sorry, Daewon said. For what? You didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry that people like him exist, that you have to deal with that. It's not your fault. She looked at him. But thank you for defending me. Most people don't. Most people should. They sat in silence for a while. Around them, other passengers settled in for the night. The cabin lights began to dim toward sleep cycle. Daewon, Thirai said softly. Can I tell you something? Of course. I was scared to take this job on New Jeju. Really scared. I knew it would be hard. Knew I would be alone. Knew people would be like that traitor. Afraid and hateful for no good reason. She paused. I almost didn't come. Almost stayed home where it was safe and familiar. What changed? Your mind? I realized that if I stayed hidden, nothing would ever change. Someone has to be first. Someone has to step out and show the galaxy that Velkari are just people. That we're not scary or dangerous or strange. Just different. And different isn't bad. No, Daewon agreed. Different isn't bad. But it's hard to be first. It's lonely. Daewon thought about this, then he said, You're not first anymore. The third day started like any other morning on the ship. Daewon woke early, the cabin still dim with night cycle lighting. Thirai was already awake beside him, reading something on her datapad. Her patterns glowed softly in the low light, providing just enough illumination for her to see. Morning, he mumbled. Good morning. We should arrive at New Jeju by this afternoon. Looking forward to real ground under your feet? Very much, she smiled. He was getting better at recognizing when she did that. And to seeing those purple mountains you told me about. They had breakfast together again. More passengers nodded greetings to them now. Little Quan waved enthusiastically from across the dining area, despite his mother's disapproving frown. Hee-jin joined them with her coffee, and they talked about New Jeju's school system. Everything was normal. Peaceful even. Then the alarm started. The sound was sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet morning atmosphere. Red lights began flashing throughout the ship. Passengers looked up from their meals, confused and starting to worry. The captain's voice came over the speakers. All passengers, please return to your seats immediately. We're entering a small asteroid field. There's some unexpected debris. Stay calm and buckle your safety belts. This is just a precaution. The dining area emptied quickly as people hurried back to the main cabin. Daewon and Thirai followed, moving through corridors that were suddenly crowded with nervous passengers. They reached their seats and buckled in. Around them, parents held children close. People checked their safety belts twice, 3 times. The ship's engines changed pitch slightly as the pilot adjusted course. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. The alarms quieted to a low warning tone. The red lights kept flashing but slower now. Some passengers began to relax. Then the ship shuddered. It wasn't a big impact, but it was enough to make people gasp. The lights flickered. Something made a loud bang from somewhere below them in the cargo areas. Attention all passengers, the captain's voice said. He sounded calm but serious. We've taken a small hit to the secondary hull in the cargo section. No immediate danger, but we're sealing off that area and checking for damage. Please stay in your seats. The ship trembled again, but lighter this time. Just the engines adjusting. People looked at each other nervously. A baby started crying somewhere in the back. Crew members moved quickly through the cabin, checking that everyone was secured and accounted for. One of them, a young man with a security badge that read Tai Min, stopped at their row. Everyone okay here? We're fine, Daewon said. Taemin nodded and moved on. But Daewon noticed that he glanced at Thirai with something like suspicion. Old habits, Daewon thought. Even in an emergency, the prejudice remained. The alarms continued. Emergency doors throughout the ship sealed themselves automatically, dividing the vessel into safe sections. It was standard procedure, Daewon knew. His engineering training told him this was all normal emergency response. But that didn't make it less frightening for the passengers. About 15 minutes passed. The crew was busy, moving between sections with equipment. Daewon could see the captain through the cockpit door, talking urgently with his officers. Something was wrong. More wrong than they were saying. Then Bora started screaming. Quan, where's Quan? Has anyone seen my son? People looked around. The little boy wasn't in his seat. Wasn't anywhere in the visible cabin. He was just here, Bora sobbed. He went to the bathroom right before the alarm. He must be on the other side of one of those sealed doors. Oh God, Quan! Taemin rushed over. Which bathroom, ma'am? The one near the cargo section. Corridor B. Taemin's face went pale. That section was sealed. The environmental systems there might be compromised. We're working on it, but my son is in there. Bora's voice rose to a shriek. Get him out! We're doing everything we can, but the crew is busy with the hull breach. We need to secure that first, or we could lose pressure in multiple sections. I promise we'll get to your son as soon as... Bora collapsed into her seat, sobbing. Other passengers tried to comfort her, but it was clear that no words would help. Her child was trapped somewhere in the dark, possibly running out of air, and no one could reach him immediately. Daewon felt Thirai go very still beside him. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "I can hear him," she whispered. "What?" "Kwan, I can hear him crying. Very faint. My hearing is more sensitive than yours. He's in a service corridor, not the bathroom. He must have gotten confused when the doors started closing." "Where?" Thirai closed her eyes, concentrating. The patterns on her skin moved rapidly, flickering through colors. "Near Corridor B, but in the maintenance passages. The crew won't look there first. They'll check the bathroom." Daewon's mind raced. He knew ships like this. He had worked on dozens of similar vessels. The maintenance passages ran through the whole ship like a second set of hallways. They were narrow and dark, meant only for crew access to ship systems. A scared child could easily wander into them by mistake. And if that section's environmental systems were failing, Kwan might not have much time. He looked toward the cockpit. The crew was completely focused on the hull breach. It would be at least another 20 minutes before they could start searching properly. Maybe longer. 20 minutes might be too long. "Can you navigate in the dark?" Daewon asked Thirai quietly. "Yes. My eyes evolved for complete darkness, and I can produce light. Then we need to go, now." The crew said to stay seated. "The crew is busy keeping the ship from breaking apart. They don't have time to search for a lost child right now. But we do." Thirai looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. They unbuckled quietly and moved toward the back of the cabin while everyone was focused on Bo-Ra's crying and the crew's efforts. No one noticed two passengers slip into a maintenance corridor. The corridor was dark except for emergency lighting that flickered weakly. Daewon led the way to a service panel he knew should be nearby. His engineering credentials still had access codes from his work on Gateway Station. Most civilian ships use the same basic systems. He opened the panel and overrode the emergency seal. The door to the maintenance passage opened with a soft hiss. "This way," he said. Inside the passage it was almost completely black. Thirai's skin immediately brightened, her patterns changing to a steady white glow that lit the way. In the strange light, the narrow corridor looked even smaller than it was. They could hear the ship's systems humming around them. Pipes and conduits ran along the walls. It smelled like metal and recycled air, and somewhere ahead, faint and frightened, came the sound of a child crying. "Kwan," Thirai called softly.
"Kwan, can you hear me?"
The crying paused. "Hello, Mom." "Not your mom, sweetie. It's Thirai, the glowing lady. Remember me? I'm scared. It's dark, I know, but I can see in the dark. I'm coming to get you. Keep talking so I can find you, okay?" "Okay," his voice was small and shaky. "I got lost. The doors closed and I couldn't find my mom." They moved through the passages, following Kwan's voice. Thirai led now, her superior hearing guiding them. Daewon stayed close behind, watching the walls for any signs of damage or air leaks. The environmental readings on a panel they passed showed yellow warnings. Not critical yet, but the oxygen was definitely lower than normal in this section. They needed to hurry. They turned a corner and found him. Kwan was sitting against a wall, hugging his knees, tears streaming down his face. When Thirai's glow illuminated him, he looked up with huge, frightened eyes. "It's okay," Thirai said gently. She knelt beside him. "We're here now. You're safe. I want my mom. We're going to take you to her. But first I need you to be very brave. Can you do that?" Kwan nodded, though his chin trembled. Daewon checked his breathing. It was fast, but not dangerously so. The boy seemed okay physically, just scared. But they needed to move. The environmental warnings were getting worse. "Listen to me, Kwan," Daewon said. "We're going to walk through these corridors back to your mom. It might seem scary, but Thirai's light will guide us. And I know exactly where we're going. You trust me? You're the nice man who sits with Thirai. That's right. And we're going to get you home. Come on." Daewon picked up Kwan, settling him on his hip. The boy wrapped his arms around Daewon's neck and held on tight. Thirai led the way again, her glow brightening to light the path better. They moved as quickly as they could through the maintenance passages. Behind them, Daewon heard an ominous hissing sound. A small leak somewhere, probably. Nothing catastrophic, but it made the need for speed more urgent. Twice they had to backtrack when passages ended or were blocked. Daewon's knowledge of ship systems helped. He knew which corridors should connect where, even if he couldn't see the layout perfectly. Thirai's senses helped more. She could hear the sounds of the main cabin, could feel the airflow that told her which way to go. Finally, they reached an access panel that opened into a storage room connected to the main cabin. Daewon opened it and they climbed through. The cabin's normal lights were almost blinding after the darkness. Passengers turned to stare as they emerged. Bora saw them and screamed, but this time with joy. "Kwan! Oh God, Kwan!" She ran and grabbed her son from Daewon's arms, clutching him so tight the boy squeaked. She was crying and kissing his head and checking him for injuries all at once. Tae-min rushed over. "Where did you find him?" "We've been searching." The final hours aboard the Horizon's gate felt different. Passengers who had avoided looking at Thirai now smiled and nodded as they passed. Some stopped to thank her again for saving Kwan. Others asked questions about Velkari culture with genuine curiosity instead of suspicion. Daewon watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. One act of courage had changed everything. Thirai was no longer the feared alien to be avoided. She was the woman who had walked into darkness to save a child. Bora approached them as they packed their few belongings. She held Kwan's hand tightly, like she might never let go again. The little boy had recovered quickly from his ordeal, though he stayed close to his mother. "I wanted to apologize," Bora said quietly. She looked ashamed. "I was afraid of you. I pulled my son away from you. I taught him to fear what I didn't understand. And then you saved his life." Thirai's patterns shifted through gentle colors. "You don't need to apologize. Fear is natural." "No, I do need to apologize. Fear might be natural, but I chose what to do with that fear. I chose suspicion instead of curiosity. I chose distance instead of understanding." She paused, then said, "I promise to do better, to teach Kwan better." "Thank you," Thirai said softly. Kwan stepped forward and held out a piece of paper. It was a drawing, done in the colored pencils the ship provided in the children's area. It showed 3 figures, a small boy, a man, and a glowing woman surrounded by stars and light. "This is you saving me," Kwan said proudly. "You're a superhero. I want to be like you when I grow up." Thirai took the drawing carefully, like it was made of glass. Her patterns brightened until she was almost too bright to look at directly. Daewon realized she was crying, not human tears but her body's equivalent, expressed through light. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you, Kwan." "You're welcome." "Miss Thirai?" After they left, Daewon asked, "Are you okay?" "I think so." Thirai looked at the drawing again. "I have never had anyone draw a picture of me before, certainly never called me a superhero." "Well, you kind of are one." She laughed, that musical sound that harmonized with itself. "I'm just a botanist who's good at seeing in the dark, who walked into a dangerous section of a damaged ship to save a child she barely knew. That's the definition of a hero in my book." The ship's announcement system chimed. "We will be landing at New Jeju Spaceport in approximately 30 minutes. All passengers, please secure your belongings and return to your seats for landing procedures." Daewon looked out the window as they descended through New Jeju's thin atmosphere. The purple mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touching the sky. Below he could see the sprawl of Haven City, the main colony settlement. It looked bigger than when he had left 6 months ago. More buildings, more lights, more growth. "There it is," he said. "Home." Thirai pressed her face close to the window, taking in everything. "It's beautiful." "Are those the bioluminescent forests you told me about?" "That's them. At night they glow almost as bright as you do. You'll fit right in." Captain Sung-ho's voice came over the speakers one final time. "Attention, passengers. Before we land, I want to say something. Yesterday, 2 people aboard this ship showed us what real courage looks like. They risked their lives to save a child. They worked together across the boundaries that sometimes divide us. They reminded us that we're all just people trying to survive in this big, scary galaxy. So on behalf of the crew and your fellow passengers, I want to thank Daewon and Thirai for showing us what it means to be truly decent human beings." He paused. "Well, 1 human being and 1 Velkari. But you know what I mean. People. Good people. We're all better for having traveled with you." Applause broke out through the cabin. Passengers turned to look at them, clapping. Theori's patterns cycled through so many colors that Daewon couldn't keep track. She gripped his hand tightly. "This is overwhelming," she whispered. "You'll get used to it. I'm not sure I want to. I'm a researcher. I like being in the background." "Too late now. You're famous." The ship touched down smoothly at the spaceport. The landing gear extended with a soft thunk. Outside the windows, Daewon could see the familiar buildings of the port facility and the mountains beyond. They were home. As passengers gathered their belongings and began filing off the ship, Hee-jin found them one more time. She handed Theori a data card. "My contact information," she explained, "and some information about housing near the research facility where you'll be working. I pulled some strings with the Colonial Administration. We want to make sure you have a smooth start here." "You did that for me?" Theori asked, surprised. "Of course. New Jeju is a new beginning for all of us. We have a chance here to build something better than what we left behind in the old systems. A place where everyone is welcome, regardless of where they came from." She smiled. "Besides, my students are going to be so excited to meet you. I already sent them a message about a visiting xenobotanist expert. Thank you, Hee-jin. Really. Thank me by making New Jeju a better place with your research. That's all the thanks I need." The disembarkation moved slowly. Passengers said goodbye to people they had gotten to know during the 3-day journey. Contact information was exchanged. Plans were made to meet again. When Daewon and Theori finally stepped off the ship onto the landing platform, the air was cool and thin. Theori took a deep breath and smiled. "It feels good to be on solid ground again." "Welcome to New Jeju," Daewon said. The spaceport was busy with activity. Ships loading and unloading cargo, passengers arriving and departing, automated vehicles moving supplies, the constant hum of a busy colony at work. But Daewon noticed something else. People were staring, not just at the ship but at them. Specifically at Theori. He tensed, ready to defend her again if necessary. Then he realized the stares weren't hostile. They were curious, interested. Some people were even taking photos. A young man with a press badge approached them. "Excuse me, are you Theori, the Valkyrie who saved that child on the Horizon's Gate?" Yes?" Theori looked confused. "Captain Sung-ho sent a report ahead to Colonial News Services. The story's already spreading. You're something of a celebrity." The reporter smiled. "Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" Theori looked at Daewon helplessly. He shrugged. "Up to you." She took a deep breath, then nodded. "A few questions, but quickly. I need to get to the research facility and check in." The reporter asked about the rescue, about her background, about why she chose to come to New Jeju. Theori answered carefully but honestly. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, her patterns settling into calm colors. More people gathered to listen. Daewon saw colonists from different species, humans, Murren, Vaxel, others. All listening to a Valkyrie woman tell her story, all accepting her presence without fear. When the interview ended, several people approached to welcome Theori to New Jeju personally. A Vaxil farmer wanted to know if she could help with crop problems. A human administrator offered assistance with housing. A Murren scientist invited her to visit their laboratory. It took nearly an hour to extract themselves from the crowd. Finally, Daewon managed to guide Theori toward the exit where public transport waited. "Is it always like this here?" Theori asked, looking dazed. "No, this is definitely because of you. But New Jeju is more welcoming than most colonies. We have to be. Life here is too hard to waste energy on prejudice. Everyone has to work together or we all fail." They took an automated tram toward Haven City proper. Theori stared out the windows at the passing scenery, the purple mountains, the strange alien vegetation that glowed faintly even in daylight. The buildings of the colony blending human architecture with practical adaptations to the local environment. "It really is beautiful," she said quietly. "I told you you'd like it." The tram dropped them at the research district where Theori would be working. The buildings here were newer, built specifically for scientific study. Gardens surrounded them, showing various experiments in cross-species agriculture. Daewon helped Thirai check in at the main administration building. The staff were expecting her and had her quarters ready. They were friendly and professional, treating her like any other new researcher. Her quarters were small but comfortable. A living space, a bedroom, a small kitchen, and most importantly, a workstation with access to the colony's research databases. Large windows looked out over one of the experimental gardens. "This is nice," Thirai said, setting down her single travel case. "Much nicer than I expected." He-Jin said she pulled strings, remember? "Still, this is more than nice. This is welcoming." Daewon helped her unpack the few things she had. It didn't take long. When they finished, they stood awkwardly for a moment, both realizing that this was goodbye, at least for now. "I should let you rest," Daewon said. "You've had a long journey." "Will I see you again?" Thirai asked quickly. Then, embarrassed, "I mean, you mentioned something about a garden project?" "The community terraforming gardens. They're on the south side of the city. I work there sometimes, helping with the environmental systems." He smiled. "I could show you around tomorrow if you want, after you've had time to settle in." "I would like that." "Then it's a plan." He headed for the door, then paused. "Thirai?" "Yes?" "I'm glad I sat next to you on that ship." Her patterns glowed warm and bright. "I'm glad you did too."